Murder and Memorabilia, Episode 3, The Knife That Wasn't There, by Wayne Valentine. It was supposed to be a quiet Monday. Calla Finch had declared it a paperwork morning. No mysterious appraisals, no questionable deliveries, just her, the till, and the comforting scent of lemon polish clinging to the window trim. She was halfway through reshelving a batch of snarky novelty bookends, fiction and lies we tell ourselves, when Baxter let out a sharp, suspicious growl. The kind of growl that didn't start in the throat, but down in the bones. The sound cut through the soft clink of porcelain and the creak of old floorboards, like a bell tolling for common sense. She looked up. Her Basset Hound was sitting bolt upright, ears stiff, gaze locked on the hallway that led to the red shelf. His posture had shifted from lazy shop dog to something closer to a sentry on duty. His tail didn't wag. It never did when that hallway was involved. Calla followed his line of sight and sighed. "What now?" she muttered, brushing her hands on her apron and crossing the room with the weary gait of someone who'd solved too many mysteries with not enough coffee. The red shelf hadn't given her much grief lately, not since the piano incident last month, and she dared to hope for at least 1 week of relatively benign antiques. But hope, she knew, was the currency of fools and amateur collectors. Antiques didn't like being ignored, especially the dangerous ones. The knife that wasn't there hadn't caused trouble in months. The velvet-lined evidence box sat in its usual shadowy corner of the red shelf, nestled between the glass eye and the widow's teacup. Always closed, always empty, but somehow never harmless. She crouched beside it, adjusting her glasses with one hand. The label, neat and unwavering in her block-letter script, stared back. Item: the knife that wasn't there. History. Cold case. No murder weapon ever found. Rumor. Knife only appears for the guilty. Status: box remains empty, allegedly. Calla had always thought the box felt heavier than it should. She moved closer and felt it immediately, a subtle shift in air pressure, like the shop had taken a breath and wasn't sure whether to let it out. The hairs on her arms rose. The faint buzz behind her ears grew louder. The glass dome over the box didn't rattle or fog, but it shimmered at the edges, like heat off pavement. Inside the box, nothing. Still nothing, except she leaned in. There was a smear. Just a faint, greasy fingerprint, dead center on the velvet lining. Oval-shaped, human. Smudged slightly at the base, like whoever left it had hesitated. It hadn't been there yesterday, or this morning, and no one had been in that room. Not even her. Baxter growled again, this time low and long, like a kettle just beginning to boil. Calla didn't say anything. She just reached into the drawer beneath the shelf, pulled out a notebook, and jotted a single line. Her print appeared. No entry or exit triggered. Possible activation. She kept the pen, folded her hands, waited. Then she sat for a moment longer than she meant to, watching the light filter through the stained glass window above the red shelf. The dust motes drifted lazily in the beam, except near the box where they spun oddly, like disturbed by breath that wasn't hers. Winnie Snow breezed in 10 minutes later with the force of a small, determined hurricane. The former reporter and current queen of town gossip wore a scarf the size of a hammock and a pair of sunglasses so enormous they could double as windshield replacements. "Calla!" she said, dropping her oversized tote onto the front counter with a dramatic thunk. "You're not going to believe who came crawling back into Summerwind." Calla didn't look up from the butter knives she was half-heartedly cleaning. She was trying to scrub off what looked suspiciously like old blood, but more likely was just rust in imagination. Someone with unresolved trauma and a guilty conscience? Winnie gasped. How did you? Never mind. Dennis Earle, class of '92, back in town for the reunion. You remember him? Vaguely. Janine Mora's high school sweetheart. The same Janine who mysteriously fell down the bleachers after a fight with said sweetheart. The same Janine who claimed she tripped, but showed up at graduation with a black eye and a bandage around her ribs. Calla raised an eyebrow. Is this leading somewhere, or are we rewriting the high school yearbook for fun? Winnie leaned closer. The knife that wasn't there. Wasn't that from that case, the one that never went anywhere? Calla blinked. She hadn't connected the dots. Not consciously. She'd acquired the box years ago from an estate auction. The contents had been listed as police paraphernalia. But the tag inside the lid read, Evidence, Case 42. Dennis is staying at the Summerwind Inn, Winnie continued. He's been seen pacing the town square, muttering to himself. You know what that means. And he's back on decaf. The past has come knocking, Winnie said triumphantly. And someone left the door wide open. That afternoon, the doorbell jingled, and in walked a man who looked like he hadn't aged so much as been eroded. Dennis Earle. Taller than she remembered, but still with that squint of someone who wasn't used to being looked at. I'm looking for a vintage lunchbox, he said, eyes darting around the shop like he expected it to close in on him. Baxter stood and immediately blocked the entrance to the red shelf hallway, the kind of territorial posture he usually reserved for drones and certain delivery men. He gave a low whoof and refused to move. Calla gestured toward the far wall. Children's section. Metal ones in the crate. The plastic ones are in the bin labeled Mild Disappointment. Dennis nodded and made his way over, but he was slow. Hesitant. Like the walls were whispering things only he could hear. He paused at a shelf of old cookbooks, fingers brushing a frayed cover. She noticed the cut on his palm. Fresh. Not bleeding, but recent. His hand hovered over a book titled Knife Skills for Nervous Beginners. Find what you need? She asked lightly. Dennis jumped. Actually, I think I'll come back later. He left so fast the door barely had time to chime. Ella walked to the red shelf. The fingerprint in the velvet was darker now. A second smudge had joined it. She wrote in her notebook. Second mark. Same pattern. Velvet indented. Baxter unsettled. Possible escalation. Then she sat with it for a while. Just her, Baxter, and the uneasy hush of the antiques around them. The box hadn't changed. But something else had. That night, Calla locked the shop, made tea, and sat cross-legged in the storage room with a box of files. She had switched out her usual peppermint blend for something stronger. Fern's special motive and memory black tea, rumored to make buried things surface. The steam curled toward the ceiling like smoke signals from another time. Case 42. She'd been keeping it in a dusty drawer under mysterious blunt force and teacup incidents. It had been sealed since she first acquired the knife's box, a relic from a defunct precinct evidence sale. Back then it had felt incomplete, unsolved in more ways than one. Now it pulsed with something else, the electric hum of attention. She flipped open the folder. Janine Morrow, age 17, senior cheer captain, popular, bright, but described by one classmate as on edge that whole year. Injury. Concussion sustained from a fall down the east side bleachers during pep rally setup. Claimed it was an accident. No witnesses to the moment itself, only the aftermath. Shouting, then silence. Blood at the base of the steps. Dennis Earle, then boyfriend, last seen arguing with her earlier that same day. Calla read the officer's report twice. Dennis had no prior record, but his interview was described as evasive. He'd claimed they were fighting about prom. Janine refused to elaborate. Her mother, Elaine Morrow, provided a curious postscript. She'd seen Dennis in their backyard late at night, burning something in a rusted trash barrel. What he was burning, he never said. The timeline was muddied. No physical weapon ever recovered. Just a box with the label, Evidence Case 42, and a velvet-lined cavity that had remained stubbornly, impossibly empty. Calla sipped her tea. It had gone cold. She flipped through the photocopies of student statements. One mentioned hearing a scream before the fall. Another recalled Janine whispering to a friend about getting out. But there was no follow-up, no forensics, no indication anyone had looked further. The principal's statement was particularly dismissive. Kids fight, she tripped. It happens. Let's not turn this into a witch hunt. Calla rubbed her forehead. There was always one of those. Someone eager to put a lid on a boiling pot. She stared at the final page for a long time. It was a photo of the original evidence box. Before it had been emptied, or perhaps before it had emptied itself. She recognized it. Same velvet. Same hinge. She closed the file gently. The next morning, Calla didn't open the shop right away. She stood in front of the red shelf for nearly 20 minutes, just watching. She didn't need to lift the dome. Didn't need to test the weight. She knew it before she saw it. The knife was there. It hadn't materialized. It had arrived. A matte silver blade, old-fashioned, nicked near the tip like it had hit bone. Its handle was worn smooth, the kind of wear that came from years of habitual grip. It sat flush against the velvet as if it had always belonged there. Except Calla knew better. She didn't touch it. Didn't even reach for the dome. Just stood there, committing every detail to memory. The tension in the air had shifted again, no longer breathless, but expectant, like the blade was listening. She updated the label with calm, precise hands. Status, active, visible to select individuals, do not remove. Note, knife appearance coincided with subject visit. Baxter barked once, not a warning, more like confirmation. Juniper and Rex arrived like summoned spirits. Juniper wore black mesh and 3 scarves. Rex had swapped out his usual pins for one that said, I investigate the vibes. They hovered just outside the red shelf boundary like nervous mediums. You feel it too, right? Juniper whispered, eyes wide. The energy is cracked, Rex added solemnly. Calla didn't argue. She didn't need to. The knife had made its own statement. Juniper held up her phone, squinting at the screen. Someone posted in the Scoop comments. Dennis confessed. At the reunion brunch, middle of the buffet. Calla's brow arched. The buffet? Right next to the bacon carving station, Rex said gravely. He stood up, holding a plate of potatoes, and said, it wasn't an accident. I pushed her. I didn't mean to hurt her, but I did. Then he sat down, finished the potatoes, and left. Went straight to the sheriff's office, Juniper added. Said he couldn't sleep, that he kept seeing a knife in his dreams. Same one that vanished after the incident. Said he felt like it had followed him all the way back to town. Calla's gaze shifted back to the shelf. The knife was gone. Not vanished, just no longer present, as if its purpose had been fulfilled. She updated the label again. Status, dormant. Note, appeared for approx 24 hours. Vanished post-confession. Emotional residue high. Recommend sealing. She affixed the new label, smoothing the edges with a practiced thumb. Then pulled out a final tag from her back pocket, one she had written years ago but never used. Until now. She pressed it against the shelf edge beneath the box. Guilt cuts deepest. Baxter flopped against the red shelf with a long, contented sigh. Calla sat back on her heels. Outside the wind stirred, but the chimes on the door stayed still. The antique shop held its breath once more. She glanced once more at the empty velvet box. It was never really about the knife, she murmured, more to herself than to Baxter. No stabbing, no blade, just a moment. One shove, one silence. One truth no one wanted to name. The knife had filled the space where justice hadn't, where questions had gone unanswered, and apologies never given. It wasn't a murder weapon. It was a missing piece. Now it was gone. And Dennis had finally said what needed saying. In Summerwind, secrets never stay buried. But sometimes all it takes is an old knife and a guilty heart to carve the truth free. Thank you for listening. Please visit me at winvalentine.com to stay up to date. Please subscribe, leave a comment, and review.